Daf Lamed Tes Amid Base will begin at Daf Lamed Tes Amid Aleph at the end of the very last line, at the bottom line. We were in the middle of a discussion where the Rav said that the Yeraka said, a person said that you can be Yoitze Yidei Chavasa, but Pesach, they can all be planted in one garden patch, meaning that they're not Klaim Zebzeh. We asked a kash from the Mishnah that said that they can plant together the different pairs. On Chazeres, Cheres Galin, or Ulshan and Ulshei Sol, they can be planted together, but they can't all of the different minim, the Chazeres and Ulshan, etc., and the Kuzbar, etc., they cannot be all planted in one vegetable patch. So now we redefine it that Man Yisraim Damar Rav, what Rav said is Yisraim Kil Chosan, means that they can be planted Kil Chosan according to the prescribed manner. Not all together, but in the proper spacing that they can all be planted together. Well, why does he have to tell me that? Why does Rav have to tell me that? We know that from the Mishnah. There's a Mishnah, and we learned in B'Sefer Shabbos. It says, Aruga Shishal Shisha Tvachim. If you have a patch that is 6 by 6 Tvachim, then Zarim B'Seicha Chamisha Zirainim, you can plant with it 5 different types of seeds. How is that? Arbal Arba Ruchas Aruga. 4 on each side, you plant one type, and you can plant one in the middle. So the way that there's different interpretations of how this works, but the way one interpretation is if you have the vegetable patch, so you can plant one min on this side, leave a tefach by tefach space blank in the corner, plant another min over here, leave a tefach by tefach space in the corner, and another one down here, and another one here. That's 4. And in the middle, you plant another one in the middle. So with that kind of spacing, you can plant 5 different types of minim in one patch, which is 6 by 6 tvachim. So we know that already. Rav doesn't have to teach us that with the proper spacing, you can plant all of these in an aruga. He doesn't have to teach me this. So why? What's he coming to teach? What's the chiddush over here? The Gemara says, the same Zroim. You might think that from the Mishnah that only applies to Zroim, to seeds, to grains. That is what's referring to. Al B'Yaraka is with vegetables, then you'd say Al B'Yaraka Sloi. You might think that they need more space, they draw from a wider area, that they derive their Yanika, and therefore it would not be applicable. Kamash Malan, the Rav says that even for Yarakais, that is, he can plant it together with that type of spacing. You mean to say the vegetables draw nourishment from a larger area than Zroim, that they're alima, that they're more robust and they can draw from a wider area. We learned in the Mishnah, it says, Kol minei zroim ein zorim baruga achas. It says all types of zroim you can't plant in one patch. Kol minei yerokas zorim baruga achas, but yerokas you can. So you see, it's just the opposite. You see that the zroim are more vigorous than the yerokas. They can't be planted in one aruga, and yerokas can. So you can't say that yerokas draw from a wider area than the Zroim. Marshal asks Kasha, why don't you ask a direct question? Why are we just proving from here that the Zroim are more vigorous than the Yerokas? Why don't you ask a direct Kasha? The next Mishnah says that the previous Mishnah said that you can plant all these Verugachas. The next Mishnah says Zroim you can't, only Yerokas. So doesn't it show you clearly that what the Mishnah was referring to when it says you could plant them in one aruga is talking about Yerokas, not Zroim. The Marshal answers that no, maybe what it means is that Kol minei Zroim and Zroim ba'aruga achas, it means in one patch, but it means with a different type of configuration. It doesn't mean to a patch that's 6 by 6 tvachim. Maybe the previous Mishnah that allows 6 by 6 tvachim is allows it in one patch, is talking about a patch that's 6 by 6 tvachim. But maybe it says, but over here in the next Mishnah, Zroim, you cannot plant it in one aruga. It's not when it's 6 by 6 tvachim. So therefore, all that we can prove conclusively, though, however, is that Zroim are more vigorous than Yerokas. So you can't say that Rav you couldn't say that the Mishnah is only talking about Zroim, and Rav had to tell you Yerakos. If the Mishnah was talking about Zroim, certainly Yerakos. Gemara says, without Rav, you'd say Mahani Mor min Zroim. You might think that these are classified as Zroim, and therefore they can't be planted together in a small patch, Kamash Malan, that they're not classified as Zroim, they're classified as Yerakos. That's what he's coming to teach you. How could you possibly say that these are Zroim and not Yerakos? Yerakos, the Mishnah says Yerakos. These are the Yerakos that you can be Yoitze, Yechiv of Mar. Vatani Bar Kapara, Yerakos. He also said these are the Yerakos. Vatani Beishmul, Yerakos. He also learned that these are the Yerakos. So how can you possibly say that they're min Zroim? More answers. That's true. He's choy. But what he means is chazeres etzrichale. The Rav has to tell me specifically the chiddush by chazeres, because you might think that since chazeres hardens eventually, it hardens, it becomes hard. And therefore, since when it hardens, the roots spread out and grows more, and it therefore derives nourishment from a wider area. And therefore, you would have to give more area, and you can't plant it together with the other species. So that's why Rav had to teach you that it's not so, that you could. Lav Amar Rabbi Yossi Berav Chanina, didn't he say Kelach shel Kruv shehuksha, the stalk of the cabbage that became hard, Marchivim lebeis roiva. We need an empty space, and you can't plant anything next to it unless you have a space of a beis roiva, a place that's large enough to plant a quarter of a cow, which is 10 by 2 by 10 by 2, 10 by 2, 10 by 2 amas, which is a very large area. So you see that once it hardens, it needs an expanded area. So Alma came in to say, you see that since it hardens, we have to provide more space. You might think also over here that you would have to give extra space. Kamash Malan, Rav teaches you that no, it can be planted together with the spacing that's mentioned in the Mishnah. According to that spacing, you could plant it, and you don't need any additional space. So the Mishnah said, invited that Yotzim behem ben lachem ben yeveshim. You can be Yotzim with them, whether they're lachin or yeveshim, whether they're moist or they're dried out. You can be Yotzim with these vegetables, but the Mishnah says but it can't be pickled, it can't be overboiled, and then the Mishnah says, v'yotzim, it says also v'yotzim b'kelach shalem. You can also be yotzim with the kelach, with the stalks of them. So Amar Rav Chisda loishan al b'kelach. Not that we say that yotzim bein lach bein yeveshim, whether they're moist or dry, that's only with the stalks. But aval be'alin, with the leaves, lachem in yeveshim like. Only when they're moist. When they're dried out, you can't use them. You can't be yotzim with them because it doesn't have the bitter taste anymore. Frankly, Gemara, how can you say that? It says afterwards. It says you can be yotzim with the kelach. Mechlal the reisha, when it says that you can be yotzim bein lach and bein yeveshim, is referring mechlal the reisha as alim is referring to the leaves. More answers. Perusha kamafarish. No, it's an explanation. It says you can be yotzim ben lach ben yeveshim. That's going akelach. That's going on the stalks, not on the leaves. Maysville asks you a kasha yotzim behem of a kelach shahem. It says you can be yotzim with them and the kelach ben lach ben yeveshim, whether they're moist or dry. Only when it's moist, yeveshim and yotzim behem, but not when they're dry. Vishavim, but they both agree. Sheyotzim behem kamushim. If they're only withered out, they're not dried, they're only withered, you can be yotzim, but not when they're preserved. V'loy shlukim, and not when they're overboiled. V'loy mevushalim, or when they're regular boiling. Klal l'shel davar, kol sheyesh boi tam mar yotzim boi. As long as it has the taste of the mar, it has a bitter taste, you can be yotzim. Kol sheyesh boi tam mar and yotzim bo. But if it doesn't have it, you cannot be yotzim. So the Tana that says it can be yotzim ben lach ben yeveshim is Rav Meir, and therefore our Tana must be going like Rav Meir. And Rameir says that you can be yoitze behem ubekelach shebehem bein lachem bein yaveshim. So you see, both the stalks and the leaf you can be yoitze. Our answer is Targum HaKelach. No, when he says that when they're dry, bein lach bein yaveshim, he's only referring to the stalks. He's only referring to the kelach. Ton Rabbanan ein yoitzim behem kemushim. We have a brisa that says that you cannot be yoitze with or without. Now, before the previous brisa, both Rabbi Meir and the Chum said you could, but this brisa says you can't. Mishum Rabbi Elazar Rav Tzadok Amro, he says yoitze behem kemushim. He says you could be yoitze when it's kemushim, when it's withered out. Boy, Rabbi Bar Chama, Mal Sheyetze Adam Yudei Chayvaz B'Marshal Meiser Sheni B'Yerushalayim. Can you be yoitze your chiyuv with Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim? Now we know the Gabe Matzah, we had a machlekes Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Yosei Galili. According to Rabbi Yosei Galili, you cannot be yoitze with them. According to Rabbi Kiva, he says you could. He says lechem oini doesn't refer to aninus. It doesn't mean something that you can eat, but in a state of aninus, and therefore would not exclude Meiser Sheni on those grounds. Now, even though it says B'chol Mashvei Seichem, which we therefore exclude Bikurim, but Rabbi Kiva says, since the Meiser Sheni, if it became Tommy, you could be pointed and eat outside of the Yerushalayim, and therefore it classifies as something that can be eaten B'chol Mashvei Seichem. So that's L'gabe Matzah. What about more? Can a person be yoitze with more of Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim? So, according to Rabbi Kiva, it's not a shayla. Hashta b'matzah the araisa nafik. If you can be yoitze with matzah, which is the raisa b'zmanazah, which is the raisa, you can be yoitze b'mor the rabbanon miboya. So more, which is a rabbanon. So certainly you can be yoitze. Certainly you can be yoitze with it. Kiti boilach, but the shayla is according to Rabbi Yosei Galili. Mine. Bim matzah the raisa hu delay nofik, where he says you cannot be yoitze with Meiser Sheni, perhaps that's only matzah, which is the raisa. Aval moror the rabbanon nofik, but moror, which is a derabanan, perhaps you could be yoitze with that. Oidilma called the tikkun rabbanon, called the tikkun rabbanon came the raisa talking, or perhaps we'll say the rabbanon the masakin came the raisa. If the mitzvah the raisa you can't be yoitze with it, the mitzvah rabbanon you also cannot. Amarovi said mistabra matzah more. We have a hekesh matzah more, and therefore it's mistabra to say that just like the matzah you cannot be yoitze with the Meiser Sheni, so too if the more the produce is from Meiser Sheni, you cannot be yoitze either. Zok the Mishnah, ein sharn esa morsel and tarnagol. You can't soak the bran for chickens. They used to soak soften the bran. The mursan is when you sift the flour, and so the coarse part of the kernel, that's the bran, they soak it to make it soft for the chickens to eat. That you cannot do because it's a chashash shall become chametz, avacholtim. But you can put it in scalding water. You can put it in boiling water. You can scald it rather. Put it in boiling water because that inhibits the process of chimutz. It doesn't become chametz when you put it in contact with the boiling water. They used to use bran also as a cleaning agent. They use it as a detergent, as a cleaning agent. So she's not allowed to soak the mursan to take with her to the merchatz, to use it as a soap, as a detergent. But she could rub it on her dry skin. So that she could use, and we're not choishes rachimutz. There's a machlekes on how to understand what that means. Does that mean that she can, when she is wet, her body is wet, that she can rub it on her body, and therefore she can't soak in the water, but even though her body is wet, her skin is wet from the merchatz, she could use it and rub it on her skin. And that's the way the Ramchal seems to understand, but the Rosh seems to understand that no, that would be also because that would be a chashash of chimutz. What it means is she can rub it on her body, even though there's the body moisture, the sweat, etc. And for that, we're not choishesh for chimutz. A person can't chew the grain and put it on the wound, on a makkah, because they become chometz. that by the chewing of the chitim in the mouth, so the saliva will be machmitz the chitim, will make it into chametz. So therefore, that's something they used to use for as a refuah, but that cannot be done on Pesach. These are the types of things which inhibit the chimutz, and it will not become chametz. Ha'afoi is something which is baked. V'amavushal is something which is cooked. V'chol shechalta b'roisem, and scalding it, putting in boiling water, scalding in boiling water. How can you say mavushal? Adam avashal mechama. By the time it boils, it cooks, it's going to become already chametz. Meaning, you can't say we're talking that he boiled it, he put it in boiling water, and that's what it means by mavushal, because that's the case of cholot. Cholot is putting in boiling water. It must be that it's cooking, and therefore it comes to a boil. But initially it puts in the water, which is not boiling. Well, by the time it's boiling, it'll be chametz already. Amar Papa, what's the pshat? He explains it as follows: how awful should bishlakom, something which is baked, and it's baked, then it's not chametz. It's awful, and now he cooks that which was baked, it does not become chametz. So it's already baked, then it's not going to become chametz, even if afterwards that he cooked it afterwards, it's not going to become chametz, even though it was now placed in warm water, which might think now that will accelerate the process and it will become chametz, kamash malan, that it is not. Tanya Rabbi Yosef if you have dripping water is dropping and it drips and it falls onto the flour, then because there's the constant activity and the pounding, the dripping on it, that inhibits the chimutz. It does not come lidei chametz. It's only continue one drop after the other. There's no interval where there is no dropping water that's dropping on it. Only then do we say it does not come lidei chimutz. Amri the Beirav Shila vatika shari. Vatika, it's food made with flour, is mutter. It's not chametz. It's mutter on Pesach. Vatanya Vatika also, we learn the Brayz of Vatika is also like kasha. It's not a kasha. Davida b'mishko milcha. When it's made with oil and salt, then we say it does not become chametz. Davida b'mayo milcha. This case where the Brayz says is also that it's a chashash of chimutz, it's where it was made with water and salt. Therefore, in that case, there's a chashash that where it'll come lidei chimutz, and it's also on Pesach. This is one of the sources that the poskim cite. There's a shaila about baking the matzah with salt. Is that mutter? This is one of the sources of it, where salt is something that will inhibit the chametz or accelerate the chimutz. So this gemara is one of the rayas to this shaila in the poskim.